In Egypt, the president's meeting with President Anwar Sadat was a step towards the Camp David Accords with Israel 5 years later. A summit in Moscow in early July was less successful. The meeting with Leonid Brezhnev reinforced détente, but failed to achieve a new arms agreement. Back home, the Watergate endgame was beginning.
The Supreme Court rules unanimously that President Nixon must turn over subpoenaed material to Watergate prosecutor Jaworski. In San Clemente, President Nixon is preparing his response to the court's order.
And one of the new tapes became known as the smoking gun because it showed how soon after the Watergate break-in arrests in 1972, the president was directing the cover-up in spite of the urging of some of his aides.
I told Richard Nixon, look, find out whoever was involved in this thing, expose them and cut your losses and get out of it. Little did I know at that point that he really thought Mitchell was involved, and he wasn't about to turn on Mitchell. So the ultimate grammar of Watergate and the great national tragedy turned on something as simple and human as Richard Nixon not wanting to turn one of his friends in.
Too loyal to Mitchell, he let Mitchell go. He let them all go. They all went to prison. And as the boat sank, he threw them out one at a time. To argue that Dick Nixon went down because he was too loyal is just ridiculous. Ehrlichman goes, Haldeman goes, Dean goes, Mitchell goes, everybody but Dick goes. And then he's out there in that boat all by himself. There's a storm coming at him, and he's trying to figure out what his options are.
The thing that's so appalling to me is that the president, when this whole idea was suggested to him, didn't in righteous indignation rise up and say, get out of here, you're in the office of the President of the United States. How can you talk about blackmail and bribery and keeping witnesses silent?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
On July 27th, the House Judiciary Committee approved the first article of impeachment. Within 3 days, it had approved 2 more.
Aye. No. No. No.
Mr. Rodino. Aye.
Before impeachment proceedings moved to the full House, the president made a final, inevitable decision. Richard Nixon had been trying to extinguish the growing flames of Watergate since before his second term had begun. Now, in early August of 1974, a year and a half later, the struggle was nearly over. Richard Nixon understood that he did not have the support in Congress to stop the impeachment process from grinding onwards. He knew he would have to go, and now he began to make his goodbyes. His family argued with him, urging him to fight, but he held firm. Still, the master politician, he knew the numbers and the political mood were against him. The family spent a final evening together in the White House on August 7th.
My father had called White House photographer Ollie Atkins up to the solarium where we just finished supper because he wanted a picture for history's sake. And we all linked arms and stood there and smiled. But my mother just hates that picture because she said there our hearts were breaking and we're smiling.
Thursday, August 8th, was spent making final arrangements. And then, at 9:01 p.m., Richard Nixon made his last speech as President of the United States.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as President, I must put the interests of America first. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
I was in prison, and I was watching his resignation on a little black and white television set, feeling, first of all, a tremendous sadness for him, personally. I liked Richard Nixon. I admired Richard Nixon. I respected Richard Nixon, and he was my friend. And I saw the country that I loved and had served as a Marine Corps captain and 4 years in the White House, torn apart. So it was a very dismal moment. And I was looking at a possible 3 years in prison. So it was not one of the happier days of my life.
Charles Colson would end up serving 7 months. John Ehrlichman would serve 18 months. Bob Haldeman would serve 18 months. John Mitchell would serve 19 months. And John Dean would serve 5 months. On the day of the resignation, Friday, August 9th, Richard Nixon made his farewell to the White House staff.
The farewell speech to the staff, it was very difficult because he was really letting down his guard for one of the few times in public. I mean, just from not only the cosmetic point of wearing the glasses, but his voice cracking with emotion as he spoke about a man is not defeated until he gives up. You have to keep going in life, keep fighting. And it was difficult.
And so we leave with high hopes, in good spirit, and with deep humility, and with very much gratefulness in our hearts.
Then his final goodbye. It's how many will always remember him.
Who knows what to say about Nixon in those last moments. I mean, what the hell was going on there? He's given the V for victory, and he's hunched over, and he's so quintessentially Nixon, and he's got that phony smile on his face. And who knows what to make about that? And it takes Shakespeare to describe this kind of a scene. It's beyond my powers as a writer.
At Andrews Air Force Base, he and Pat would transfer to Air Force One for the journey home to California, to the house by the Pacific at San Clemente. Then, in a surprise announcement, just 1 month after the resignation, Gerald Ford